I spent about 6 years working as a backcountry ranger in the Ozark National Forest, which is spread across northern Arkansas and a little sliver of Oklahoma too. Now, I didn't grow up planning to be a ranger or anything like that. Truth be told, I was studying to be an accountant at the University of Arkansas. But after my junior year, I took this ecology course as an elective, just to fill out my schedule, and something about it just clicked with me in a way that numbers on a spreadsheet never did. My professor, Dr. Hernandez, she was the one who suggested I look into the ranger program, said I had the right temperament for it, whatever that meant. And so after I graduated, instead of heading to some accounting firm in Little Rock, I applied to the National Park Service and ended up stationed in the Ozarks. Now, the Ozarks aren't like your Rocky Mountains or your Appalachians. They're older, more worn down by time, and the forest is thick as molasses in places. We've got white-tailed deer, black bears, bobcats, and more copperheads and timber rattlers than you can shake a stick at. It's beautiful country, don't get me wrong, but it is also the kind of place where you can get turned around real quick if you don't know what you are doing. And that's exactly why we had rangers like me out there, making sure the trails were maintained and that hikers didn't wander off into places they shouldn't. One of my regular duties was doing what we called boundary walks. Basically, I'd hike along the edges of the national forest land to make sure there weren't any encroachments, illegal hunting camps, that sort of thing. It was mostly boring work, if I'm being honest. You'd spend hours walking through the woods, checking your GPS, taking notes, but it got me outside, and after years of being cooped up in classrooms, I wasn't about to complain about that. It was late October of 2003, and I was doing a boundary walk along the eastern edge of the forest near the Buffalo National River. The leaves were just starting to turn, and it was one of those perfect fall days where the air is crisp and cool, but the sun is still warm on your face. I had my standard gear with me, a Kelty backpack with water, some trail mix, my GPS unit, a satellite phone for emergencies, and my service weapon, a Glock 22N, 40 caliber. We didn't carry them to look tough or anything like that. It was just standard issue in case we ran into an aggressive animal or, God forbid, some armed poacher who didn't want to be found. I'd been walking for maybe 3 hours when I came across something I'd never seen before in all my time out there. Someone had stacked stones into these little cairns, maybe about knee-high, and they were arranged in a perfect line stretching off into the woods. Now, cairns aren't unusual on trails. Hikers build them all the time as markers or just for fun. But these were different. For one thing, I was a good 2 miles from the nearest trail. For another, they were too uniform, too precisely placed. Each one was exactly the same height, and they were spaced exactly 10 feet apart. I know because I measured. I should have just noted it in my log and kept moving. That's what protocol said to do if you found something unusual. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the line of cairns to see where they led. I marked my position on the GPS and started walking alongside them, counting as I went. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted 27 of them before they stopped at the base of a limestone bluff. At first, I didn't see anything special about the spot. Just another rock face with some moss and ferns growing on it. But then I noticed there was a gap in the limestone, kind of a narrow crack that widened into what looked like a small cave entrance. It was maybe 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, just big enough for a person to squeeze through if they crouched down. And right there at the entrance, someone had built the biggest cairn of all, maybe waist high, with a flat stone on top. Now, I'm not a superstitious person by nature. I believe in what I can see and measure and prove. But standing there looking at that cave entrance, I felt something I can only describe as wrong. You know how sometimes you just get a feeling about a place? Like your gut is telling you to turn around and walk away. That's what I felt right then. But like I said, I was curious, and I figured I was being silly. So I pulled out my flashlight, a Mac light that could probably double as a club if I needed it to, and I ducked into that cave. The tunnel was tight at first, and I had to sort of shuffle along in a crouch for maybe 10 or 15 feet. But then it opened up into a chamber that was big enough to stand in. My flashlight beam swept across the space, and that's when I saw them. Hundreds of stones, all stacked into cairns, filling almost the entire floor of the cave. Some were small, just a few rocks balanced on top of each other. Others were elaborate towers that reached almost to the ceiling, and in the very center of the chamber, there was a circle of larger cairns surrounding a flat area of bare stone. I took a few steps closer, playing my light over the cairns, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Some of the cairns had things built into them, not just rocks, but other stuff. I saw what looked like animal bones, small ones like you'd find from a rabbit or a squirrel. I saw strips of cloth tied into knots, and in one cairn near the circle, I saw something that looked an awful lot like a child's toy. One of those little plastic dinosaurs you can get at the dollar store. I should have left right then and there. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that cave. But I couldn't stop staring at that circle in the center. The flat area of stone looked different from the rest of the cave floor. It was too clean to smooth, like someone had been maintaining it. And as I got closer, I could see there were markings on it. Not words exactly, but symbols carved into the limestone. Circles and lines and shapes that didn't make any sense to me. That's when I heard it. A sound coming from deeper in the cave, from a tunnel I hadn't noticed on the far side of the chamber. It was a scraping sound, like stone on stone, and it was getting louder. I froze, my hand going to my pistol out of pure instinct. The scraping stopped, and for maybe 5 seconds, there was total silence. And then I heard breathing, not animal breathing, but human breathing, slow and steady and way too close. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran back toward the entrance, forgetting to crouch and smacking my head hard enough on the low ceiling that I saw stars. But I didn't stop. I kept moving, half crawling, half scrambling until I burst out of that cave and into the daylight. I didn't stop running until I was past the line of cairns, and even then, I kept looking back over my shoulder to make sure nothing was following me. When I got back to the ranger station, I filed a report about what I'd found. My supervisor, a guy named Tom Berkeley who'd been with the Park Service for about 20 years, read it over and then gave me this look that I couldn't quite read. He asked me if I had taken any photos, and I realized with a sick feeling that I hadn't. I'd been so focused on getting out of there that I'd completely forgotten to document anything. Tom told me he'd send a team out to investigate, but he also told me something else. He said that every few years, they'd get reports of cairns like that showing up in different parts of the forest. Usually, they'd send someone to dismantle them, but within a few months, they'd be back. He said the prevailing theory was that it was some kind of art project or maybe teenagers playing around, but that they'd never actually caught anyone building them. And he said, and I remember his exact words here, "Some things in these woods are better left alone." They did send a team out about a week later, and I even went with them to show them where the cave was. But when we got there, the cairns were gone. All 27 of them, including the big one at the cave entrance. We searched the area for hours, and I even checked my GPS coordinates 3 times to make sure I had the right spot. But there was nothing. No stones, no cave entrance, nothing. Just solid limestone bluff without so much as a crack in it. The other rangers didn't say I was lying or anything like that. They were professional about it, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I'd gotten turned around, mixed up my location, maybe hit my head harder than I thought when I was running out of that cave. And maybe they were right. Maybe I did get confused. But I know what I saw in that cave, and I know what I heard. And I also know that about 2 months after all this happened, I put in for a transfer to Hot Springs National Park. I told everyone it was for career advancement, which was partly true. But the real reason was that I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me every time I went into the woods. And I couldn't shake the memory of that breathing in the dark. I'm a park ranger at Denali now. Been here for about 4 years, and I love it. The wilderness up here in Alaska is beautiful and dangerous and honest. If a bear wants to kill you, it doesn't hide in a cave and stack rocks. It just kills you. And somehow, that's a lot less terrifying to me than whatever I found in those Ozark woods back in 2003. The early morning mist hangs heavy over the water, clinging to the surface of Lake of the Woods like a shroud. My small fishing boat cuts a silent path through the glass-like surface. This is my escape, my annual sorrow trip. Just me, the rhythmic slap of water against the hull, and the promise of a big catch. I cast my line, the lure plopping softly into the deep, dark water. The silence out here is usually my favorite part, a deep, resonant quiet that settles the soul. But today, it feels different. It feels watchful. I scan the shoreline, a dense, unbroken wall of pine and rock. Nothing, just the loons calling their mournful song across the lake. I shake my head, trying to clear the feeling of unease. It's just the isolation playing tricks on me. I reel in my line slowly, the familiar rhythm a small comfort. That's when I see it. A flicker of movement on a distant, rocky point. I squint, my heart giving a little jump. It's another boat, almost identical to mine, pulled up on the shore, and a figure standing beside it, motionless, just a silhouette against the grey sky. It's strange. You rarely see another soul in this remote part of the lake. He's too far away to make out any features, but I can feel his gaze on me. It's an intense, unnerving feeling, like a laser pointer on my back. I raise a hand in a tentative wave, the universal greeting of boaters. He doesn't respond. He just stands there, a dark statue against the wilderness. A cold knot tightens in my stomach. I pull the starter cord on my motor. The engine sputters to life, shattering the quiet. Time to find a new spot. A couple of hours pass. The sun has burned through the mist, but not the feeling of being watched. I've moved to a small, secluded cove, the kind of place where the wall I love to hide. I'm just starting to relax, telling myself I was being paranoid, when a sound drifts across the water, the low hum of an outboard motor. My head snaps up. It's him, the same boat, the same dark figure at the helm, heading straight for my cove. He cuts the engine about 100 yards out, letting his boat drift. He doesn't fish. He doesn't do anything. He just sits there watching me. My blood runs cold. This isn't a coincidence. This is deliberate. My hand trembles as I reach for my phone. No signal. Of course, out here, you're on your own. My heart is hammering against my ribs. I have to get out of here. I yank the starter cord again and again, my panic rising with each failed attempt. Come on, come on. Finally, the engine roars to life. I don't look back. I jam the throttle forward, sending my boat skipping across the water, away from the cove, away from him. I head for the main channel, my mind racing. Who is he? What does he want? The rational part of my brain is screaming that I'm overreacting, that he's just another fisherman. But my gut, my primal instinct, is telling me I'm prey. I risk a glance over my shoulder. He's following, not too close, but keeping a steady, relentless pace. My little fishing boat feels terribly small and vulnerable. He could easily ram me, capsize me. No one would ever know. The lake is vast, and its secrets are deep. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. It should be beautiful, but all I feel is a rising dread. Darkness is coming. I've been running for what feels like hours, zigzagging through islands and channels, trying to lose him. But he's always there, a persistent shadow on my tail. My fuel gauge is nearing empty. I have to make a stand. I spot a small, deserted island with a dilapidated old cabin near the shore. It's my only chance. I beach my boat, grabbing the heavy, cast iron skillet from my gear, the only thing I have that could be a weapon. My legs are shaky as I scramble up the bank towards the cabin. The door hangs on one hinge, groaning as I push it open. Inside, it's dark and smells of rot and damp earth. I hide behind the door, my skillet held high, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I can hear his boat landing on the shore, the soft crunch of boots on gravel. He's coming. The footsteps are slow, deliberate. One after another, they draw closer to the cabin door. Crunch, pause, crunch. The sound is deafening in the silence. My knuckles are white around the skillet's handle. Sweat drips into my eyes. This is it. The shadow of a man falls across the doorway. He's tall, gaunt, his face hidden by the deep twilight. He takes one step inside, then another. My whole body is coiled like a spring. I can't breathe. He stops, just a few feet from my hiding spot. I can hear him breathing, a low, steady sound. Then he speaks. His voice is raspy, unused. You drop this. My eyes dart down. He's holding something out. It's my wallet. It must have fallen out when I beached the boat. I just stare at it, my mind unable to process. He continues, his voice softer now. Saw it on the shore. Figured you'd need it. Been trying to catch up to you all day. Your gas cap is loose too. Leaking fuel. Thought you should know. He places the wallet on a dusty crate, turns, and walks out of the cabin without another word. I hear his motor start, and then the sound fades into the distance, leaving me alone in the darkness. My skillet clatters to the floor. I sink down against the wall, the silence of the lake rushing back in, no longer menacing, but just quiet. I got into cabin sitting kind of by accident. To be honest with you, I was 24, fresh out of a bad breakup, and I needed to get out of Seattle for a while and clear my head. One of my buddies from college, Justin, his family owned this cabin up in the North Cascades, and they needed someone to stay there during the winter months to make sure pipes didn't freeze, keep an eye on things, that sort of deal. Justin knew I was going through a rough patch, and he offered me the job, free room and board, plus a little stipend for expenses. I jumped at it. The cabin was near a tiny town called Mazama, which is about as remote as you can get in Washington state while still being sort of near civilization. We're talking maybe 50 full-time residents, and in the winter, probably half that. The cabin itself was beautiful, one of those classic log cabin types with a big stone fireplace, pine floors, the whole 9 yards. It was about 2 miles from the nearest neighbor and sat on a 20-acre property that backed up to national forest land. Justin's dad, Mr. Parnell, met me up there in early November to show me the ropes. He was a nice enough guy, probably in his late 50s, and he'd built the cabin himself back in the 80s. He showed me how to work the generator, where the firewood was stacked, how to maintain the wood stove, all the practical stuff. And then, right before he left, he said something that stuck with me. He said, "Gary, that's my name. By the way, you're going to be out here alone for long stretches, and that can mess with your head if you're not careful. If you start feeling lonely or spooked or whatever, just remember that those feelings aren't real. They're just your brain playing tricks on you." I thought it was good advice at the time, and I thanked him for it. The first few weeks were actually great. I'd wake up, make coffee, do some maintenance work around the cabin, chop firewood, read books by the fire. It was exactly the kind of solitude I needed after the chaos of my breakup and my retail job back in Seattle. I had a satellite phone for emergencies and a laptop with some downloaded movies and shows, so I wasn't completely cut off from the world. But mostly, I just enjoyed being alone with my thoughts. It was around the 3rd week that things started to feel a little off. I was out chopping wood one afternoon, maybe around 3:00 p.m., and I got this feeling like someone was watching me. You know that feeling when the hair on the back of your neck stands up? It was like that. I stopped mid-swing and looked around, scanning the tree line, but I didn't see anything. Just trees and snow and that grey winter light that makes everything look kind of spooky. I went back to chopping wood, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. I ended up finishing up quickly and heading back inside, which annoyed me because I was supposed to split enough wood to last me through the next cold snap, and I'd only gotten through about half of what I needed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there in the trees, watching me. That night, I was sitting by the fire reading when I heard something outside. It sounded like footsteps crunching through the snow, slow and deliberate. I set my book down and listened, my heart starting to beat faster. The footsteps circled around the cabin, and I could track their progress by the sound. Around the front, past the living room window, around to the kitchen side, and then around back toward the bedrooms. I grabbed the flashlight that I kept by the door and went to the window, shining it out into the darkness. The beam cut through the night, illuminating the snow and the trees, but I didn't see anything. No person, no animal, nothing. The footsteps had stopped. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, just watching and listening, but there was nothing but silence. I told myself it was probably just an elk or a deer, even though I knew the footsteps had sounded too regular, too measured to be an animal. I went back to my book, but I couldn't concentrate. Every little sound made me jump, and I ended up going to bed early, though I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I went outside to check for tracks. If something had been walking around the cabin, there should have been prints in the snow. But when I looked, there was nothing. The snow around the cabin was undisturbed except for my own footprints from the day before. That should have made me feel better, but somehow it made me feel worse. I knew what I'd heard, and the absence of tracks didn't explain it away. It just made the whole thing feel more wrong. Over the next few days, the footsteps became a nightly occurrence, always around the same time, usually between 9:00 and 10:00 p.m., and always following the same path around the cabin. I started calling it my visitor, which probably sounds stupid,
but giving it a name made it feel less scary somehow.
I tried to see it a few more times, shining my flashlight out the window whenever I heard it, but I never saw anything. I called Justin on a satellite phone about a week into this and told him what was happening. He laughed it off and said it was probably just the cabin settling or the wind playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe him, but I knew the difference between the cabin creaking and the sound of footsteps in snow. Still, I didn't push it. I didn't want him to think I was losing it. Things escalated about a month into my stay. I was in the kitchen making dinner, some kind of pasta dish, when I heard a knock on the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze, the pasta spoon still in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. I wasn't expecting anyone. Justin had said no one would be coming up until at least February, and we were barely into December. I set the spoon down and walked slowly toward the front door, my mind racing. Should I open it? Should I ask who it was? Should I pretend I wasn't home? In the end, I called out, "Who is it?" and waited. There was no answer. I waited maybe a minute, and then asked again, louder this time, "Who's there?" Still nothing. I thought about opening the door. I really did, but something stopped me. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fear, but I decided not to. Instead, I went to the living room window and looked out, trying to see if there was a car or a person or anything that would explain the knock. But there was nothing, just the empty driveway and the trees and the snow. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on and the fireplace poker in my lap, just in case. The knocking didn't come again, but the footsteps did, circling the cabin like always. I didn't get up to look. I just sat there and listened until the sun came up. The next day, I checked the front porch for footprints, and just like before, there was nothing. At that point, I was starting to seriously question my sanity. Was I hallucinating? Was the isolation getting to me the way Mr. Parnell had warned? I considered packing up and leaving, but I didn't want to let Justin down, and honestly, I didn't want to admit that I couldn't handle a few months alone in a cabin. The knocking became another regular occurrence after that, sometimes on the front door, sometimes on the back door, once even on one of the bedroom windows. Always 3 knocks, always slow and deliberate, and never any sign of who or what was doing it. I started sleeping with the lights on, which I know sounds childish, but it was the only way I could get any rest at all. I kept the fireplace poker next to my bed, along with the big maglite flashlight and my phone. I didn't have a gun, which in retrospect was probably a mistake, but I'd never been much of a gun guy. It was early January, about 2 months into my stay, when things came to a head. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard the back door open. Not the knock, not the footsteps, but the actual sound of the door opening, the hinges creaking, the cold air rushing in. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering in my chest, and I grabbed the fireplace poker. I should have stayed in my room. I should have called for help on the satellite phone. But instead, I did the stupid thing. The thing that people always do in horror movies, and I went to investigate. I crept down the hallway toward the kitchen, the poker raised and ready, and I could see the back door standing wide open, snow blowing in onto the kitchen floor. I approached it slowly, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn around and run. I didn't think, I just reacted. I slammed the door shut as hard as I could and threw the deadbolt. And then I ran back to my bedroom, locked that door too, and called Justin on a satellite phone. I was shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone, and when Justin answered, I just started babbling about someone being at the cabin, someone trying to get in. To Justin's credit, he believed me. He said he'd call the local sheriff and that he'd drive up himself first thing in the morning, which was about 6 hours away. He told me to stay in my room, keep the door locked, and not to open it for anyone except him or the sheriff. I did exactly that. I sat in that bedroom with the poker in my lap for the rest of the night, listening to the footsteps circling the cabin, listening to the occasional knock on the door, but I didn't move. I barely even breathed. The sheriff showed up around 8 o'clock a.m., and Justin arrived maybe an hour after that. I let them in, and we searched the whole property, looking for signs of an intruder. We found tracks this time, finally, but they were strange. They led from the tree line to the back door, and then they just stopped. They didn't lead away from the cabin. They didn't circle back into the woods. They just ended at the back door like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. The sheriff took some photos and filed a report, but I could tell he was skeptical. He asked me if I'd been drinking, if I'd taken any medication, if I had a history of mental illness. I answered no to all of it, but I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking I was losing it out here in the isolation.
Justin convinced me to stay one more night, just so we could pack up my stuff in the daylight and not leave the cabin empty.
I agreed, but only because he stayed with me.
We both slept in the living room with the fire going and the doors barricaded with furniture. The footsteps came again that night, and the knocking too, and this time Justin heard it.
He didn't say much, just looked at me with this pale, frightened expression. And I knew he believed me now. We left the next morning, and Justin hired a different cabin sitter. Some older guy who'd done it before, and didn't seem bothered by the idea of staying out there alone. I asked Justin to let me know if the new guy experienced anything strange, but he never called.
Either the new guy didn't experience anything, or Justin didn't want to tell me about it.
I moved back to Seattle and got a job at a different retail store. I don't talk about what happened at the cabin because I know how it sounds, but every now and then, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about those footsteps circling the cabin.
I think about the 3 slow knocks on the door, and I think about whoever or whatever was standing outside that back door, breathing in the cold January air, and I'm glad I never opened that door to see who it was.